This is Ryan Finkelstein, host of Locked On Mets, and on today's show, I was joined by Ben Kaspick, host of Locked On Giants, to preview the upcoming series and talk about two teams that have been heading in completely different directions.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants Baseball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm obviously joined today here by Ryan Finkelstein of Locked On Mets. Thank you so much, Ryan, for joining the show today.
Yeah, it's good having you on my show as well. A little crossover before a big matchup between two teams that are definitely destined for the playoffs, right? Are you going to lie to me and tell me the Mets still have a chance?
Hey, they looked for the first half of the season like they had a very good chance, and then lately it hasn't been going that way. Like I said in the intro, two teams going in different directions. I mean, the Mets, people expected them to be good coming into the year, I would say. I mean, they make some big acquisitions, obviously Francisco Lindor, and the pitching that they have. And, you know, there's been some injuries, definitely. That's been a factor. But at this moment in time, going in completely different directions, is that a fair characterization, you think?
100%. 100%. The Giants right now are destined to make the playoffs. You know, they're in a race to win the division, which is exciting, of course, for your fans. But you know, the Mets right now, the Braves, the way they've been winning, I mean, 16 of 18, although I think they might lose to the Yankees tonight, hopefully, as we record, the game still going on. But I mean, the way the Braves have been playing, it's looking a little more far-fetched that the Mets are going to be able to catch them, which is just stunning because 2.5 weeks ago, it was a completely different story for the Mets.
I know, and it just speaks to the fact that, like, we look at last year with the 60-game season. If this season had been 60 games, all the stuff that would have been different, and how in baseball it really is like a big sample game. And I just personally find that really interesting to think about what would have been different. Like the Braves, people would have thought of them as having a very disappointing year if it had been a 60-game season. But now it looks like they may run away with the division and end up having a very good year despite losing Ronald Acuna Jr. earlier on. So that's just kind of the fascinating part of baseball. And I think what's interesting too, though, is a lot of people would have thought that the Giants would be one of those teams that would fade from contention. Like, despite getting off to a good start, I think a lot of people expected them to fade away, but they just haven't. They've shown no signs of letting up, which has been remarkable. Even to me, I was kind of high on them coming into the year, a lot higher than most, but I didn't expect them to. They've set the pace for the whole league, basically the whole season, which has just been incredible.
Yeah, I think it shows the different caliber of teams in these two respective divisions. The Mets, you know, were leading almost wire to wire. They had that lead. It was always 4 or 5 games, but they never really did pull away. And they were always, you know, they had a great May, and then they were playing about 500 baseball. And you let a team like the Braves hang around long enough, and all takes is one hot month, and all of a sudden everything can flip. So I think it just shows, you know, with what's going on out west. I mean, the caliber of team in the NL West is just simply head and shoulders better than the caliber of teams out east. And so it's been a completely different race where if the Giants were in the NL East right now, they have like a 20-game lead. I mean, it'd be crazy. They might be
Yeah.
talking about a magic number right now. I mean, you might be like, all right, magic number 7, and we're not
Right.
in September yet. I mean, it's just crazy how baseball, you know, works out that way. And I was actually talking to a buddy of mine at work the other day who's a big Red Sox fan. And I said, you know, if it was a 200-game season, maybe the Red Sox would have time to get back in it and, you know, actually contend in the division. You know, I mean, obviously they're kind of falling off like the Mets. It's just one of those sports where you need to be hot at the right time. As much as people talk about being hot in April and May, it counts the same as it does in August and September. I don't think that's exactly the case. I think the Mets are kind of proving that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't even realize how bad it had become. But as I look, 7 games back in the division and 7 games back in the wild card right now, and 5.1% playoff odds according to Fangraphs. I had no idea. I'm sorry to bring that up. I'm sure it's a little bit of a sensitive subject, but I mean, for a while there, it looked like they were a shoo-in, and it seems to have fallen dramatically really fast. But I know
I
you
mean,
had.
if you followed this team as long as I have, you know that it's better to laugh than cry in the situation. So, I'm okay with you bringing it up. It's kind of funny to me how everything has changed so quickly.
Yeah, so I know that you had some questions for me about the front office of the Giants. So did you want to just jump into
Yeah,
those?
yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting to look at where the Giants are. I was gonna say, I'm sure that anytime you've done a crossover or been a guest on any podcast or radio show this year, I'm sure the first question is just how? How are the Giants doing this? But I think instead of just focusing on this year, I'm really curious what was that change in how the organization was run when Farhan came in after the 2018 season. The Giants, if I remember correctly, really bottomed out in 2017 and 2018. I know they've kind of still been a below 500 team the last few years, but they didn't take the traditional scrap it all and start over approach. What has it been like that has got them to this point where suddenly they have a mix of the old guys and some of the new ones that have put them atop this division all year long?
There's been a lot to it. One of the big things that jumps off the page is when Bruce Bochy retired, a new coaching staff was brought in, and some of those hitting coaches have really helped the players get better. Like when we look at the resurgences of Buster Posey and Brandon Crawford and even Evan Longoria and Brandon Belt, they're all having monster kind of resurgences, and it has a lot to do with the hitting coaches adjusting their mechanics. These are the type of coaches, and I want to give them names, not just say they're types of coaches. Donnie Ecker, Justin Veely, and Dustin Lind, the types of guys who have helped the likes of Justin Turner and JD Martinez turn their careers around. So that's a big part of it. But like you said, with Farhan Zaidi coming in, he didn't go a traditional route and just tear down this team. And that's what a lot of people expected them to do. But instead, I mean, they found kind of diamonds in the rough and made minor acquisitions to acquire them, like Mike Yastrzemski, who had an MVP type year in the short season in 2020. And this year, they're getting tremendous production out of Lamont Wade Jr. after they acquired him in a trade from the Twins. And it's just been little kind of moves like that. Darren Ruff, who used to be with the Phillies in the NL East, went to Korea and was awesome in Korea, and they bring him over, and he's been just as good as he was in Korea with the Giants, particularly in a platoon kind of role against left-handed pitching. So huge dedication to like getting matchups, and the way Gabe Kapler manages is constant pinch hitting to get better matchups. And, they've got a left-handed lineup that you'll see against right-handed pitching, and they've got a right-handed lineup that you'll see against left-handed pitching. And it has been effective. And it was effective last year. The Giants quietly were a really good offensive team in 2020. And I think a lot of people didn't really realize that. You had your Cinderella stories like the Marlins making the postseason, but the Giants were, I think the Marlins were 2 games ahead of the Giants, and the Giants lost their last 3 games of the year. And if they had won one of them, or I think actually they lost their last 4 games of the year, 3 or 4. And if they had won just one, they would have made the postseason. And I think they are not a team that people would have wanted to face. They would have faced the Dodgers. I don't think the Dodgers would have wanted to face that team because it was really similar to this team, really underrated, scored a lot of runs, hit a lot of homers. And at the top of the rotation, they had Kevin Gausman and Drew Smyly, or not actually, was pitching really, really well for the Giants last year. So on the pitching side, it's been finding guys like Kevin Gausman and him turning into a front line starter. And Anthony DeSclafani has been great for the Giants. So they've just kind of nailed a lot of the acquisitions that they've made. And most of those acquisitions have not been major acquisitions. In fact, the only major kind of acquisition they've made was acquiring Chris Bryant at this season's trade deadline. So it has not been traditional, but Zaidi has that track record with the A's and with the Dodgers. and he's brought that over to the Giants, and I couldn't be happier personally. I was long hoping that that would be the type of direction they would go, and I think they nailed it with that hire, and Zaidi is just continuing to kind of prove his legacy, I would say.
And the one, I mean, massive acquisition that you didn't mention there is Wilmer Flores. I mean, come on, you're talking to the Mets guy here. How's Flo doing this year? Playing all right?
He just made a big error that I was talking about a lot today. He's not the best defender, but man, can he hit and hit for power. I didn't really quite know he was such a kind of force, especially against left-handed pitching, and particularly in 2020, he had a big role in what I was saying with that team being so good offensively. He had some huge hits, and he was just money kind of all season. This year, it's been a little bit more of a struggle for him. He's kind of been forced into an everyday role at times when Evan Longoria missed like 60 games, 60 plus games. Flores was playing third like every day. And I think defensively at third base, he's challenged a little bit. But yeah, I mean, he's a great guy, great teammate, and the Giants are better for having him.
It's that time of year again, as all eyes are now turning to football, with teams getting back on the gridiron in a season that is just around the corner. As always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action that you want this season. Get all the updated odds, props, and contests, including online's biggest $500,000 NFL mega contest and the world's largest $200,000 NFL Survivor contest, which are open now at BetOnline. If you head to the website or use your mobile device, you can sign up today and also receive your 100% welcome bonus. Then be sure to take advantage of their opening day super promo, where you can make a bet on the first game of the season on Thursday, September 9th, between the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. And if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25 for new customers only when signing up and using the promo code NFL100. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. Make sure you check them out now. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts.
So yeah, as we were talking about Wilmer Flores, he definitely has been a big part of the Giants team. I just wish he was better defensively. Was he? I mean, I know he used to play shortstop. I can't imagine
Not
what that
well.
looked like. Yeah,
Yeah, not
not
well.
well.
I mean, Flores was always one of those guys that had the versatility, but it wasn't quality versatility. He can, yeah, if you want to play him at shortstop, he'll feel the balls hit right at him sometimes. But it's not going to look good when he's trying to turn a double play. Very slow moving. I mean, honestly, his best position is first base because it's the easiest to play. I also thought at times he was even better at second. He just, I don't know, get him on that side of the field maybe helps a little bit, but overall, I think Flores was just a huge fan favorite. And when it comes to his ending with the Mets, it's clear the Mets made a big mistake non-tendering him. I mean, he's not a guy that should be non-tendered. He has value as, if you go into a season where Wilmer Flores is the first bat off your bench that can fill in when a guy like Longoria goes down, that's a luxury that is worth whatever he was going to make that year. I think like $4 million. And basically, the old ownership was quick to kind of cast off players that were homegrown that maybe didn't live up to the top prospect type. I think at one point, Flores was like a top 5 prospect in the Mets system. So he does have that track record, and he's turned himself into a quality major league player that's going to have over a decade in the bigs. And that's really impressive, honestly. You can't say that is anything more than a successful big league career.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, that's kind of let him go too soon. Is it just me, or does he have a track record of doing that? I think of Justin Turner. That's a huge one. We lost you for a second, but we were talking about
you're talking
Justin
about how
Turner.
Justin Turner was a huge regret for the Mets, and absolutely.
Yeah.
If you want to name a couple more, Daniel Murphy, Zach Wheeler is a personal gripe for me because my entire first year of Locked On Mets was just saying, please don't let this guy leave. And now he is a Cy Young candidate. There's been a lot of them. Travis d'Arnaud is another. That is why the Wilpons leaving was worthy of a parade in New York City, quite honestly, to get rid of them. And hopefully now with Steve Cohen, the Mets won't be giving up on players too soon, but it's too early to tell.
It's too early to tell, and it's already been from afar. a bit of an interesting start for Steve Cohen. Like some of the stuff that he's put out there on Twitter, I know he's like the only owner that I know of who's like active on Twitter. I can't stand the way he punctuates with his comma and periods, like with a
Yeah.
space around them. I just can't stand that.
Yeah, it's bad.
He's obviously a smart guy, a wealthy guy, but he doesn't know how to punctuate. But
It's all about the numbers for him, as a hedge
okay,
fund guy. It's not that much
yeah,
about the wording.
grammar, yeah. But he made some comments when the Mets were in San Francisco last week, as we lost Ryan again. We're gonna get him back here. Hey, welcome back. Talking about Steve Cohen making some comments when the Mets were in San Francisco. He had to say out on Twitter, like bashing the Mets hitters. He said it's hard to fathom how professional hitters could be so unproductive, and the slugging OPS numbers don't lie, something like that, something to that effect.
Yeah.
So personally, I was like, man, I'm not sure that's what you want to be saying. I'm not sure that's the right way to motivate a team. Clearly he was trying to put a little fire on it. What were your thoughts on that? And what has been the reaction? I'm speechless.
I think Steve Cohen is hacking the broadcast. I don't think Steve Cohen likes that we're talking about him in a negative light here. I think that's what's going on here. It's got to be.
Yeah, for those of you listening who are maybe unfortunately being subject to this, we're having internet connection problems. I believe it's my fault, which I don't know how else I can do this. I'm plugged into my super high speed, expensive internet, and I'm plugged in directly into the router. So I don't know how that's possible, but internet problems. It's a common thing. Maybe Steve Cohen. I think that's a good
It's
call
Steve
there.
Cohen.
Powerful
And
man.
I will tell you, I mean, it's it's weird to have your owner tweeting like the guy who's in section 320 who's pissed off in the middle of the game, but that's what that
Mm,
came across as. And it's just fans loved it. I'll say that. Mets fans surprisingly
mm.
rallied. They're like, yeah, Steve's saying what I'm thinking. Why do they suck? But if you're in the clubhouse, you don't want to read that. And I just don't think that's very productive. I think that the fact that he cares that much is a good sign that, if things aren't going well, there's going to be changes, but it can't be something that the players are happy about. And I don't think that that motivates them to suddenly, be better professionals. It doesn't work like that. But hitting a baseball is very, very hard.
Exactly. To me, it came across as a guy who's never played the game of baseball, because it is not. I mean, to say that these guys are so much better than you could ever dream of being at baseball, and it is hard, and they've been grinding months every day since spring training. The travel, the grind of the schedule, and you're kicking them while they're down. To their credit, they won that game, the next game against the Giants, and they came back in the ninth. But I mean, they didn't have any runs until the ninth inning.
Yeah.
But they did win
I will tell you, because I was actually just recently, I was at the Louisville Slugger Museum, and they had this thing, you pay like a quarter, you can take a couple cuts. And I think they said that it was coming in at like 60. And it took me a while to square it up because I haven't swung a bat since high school. And I was like, man, that's 60 miles an hour. Like, you would be stunned. They also have another exhibit where they show you what 95 looks like. And you can't even see the ball. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Like, to think that it's as simple as, oh yeah, the approach is bad. They should be able to, as professional hitters, to turn a switch on and be great. It's just not realistic. This is the height of one of the most difficult things in the world to do, is square up 100 miles per hour. And obviously the Mets have to be better, but the owner tweeting isn't going to help them. That's for sure.
Right. And the fact is that I think there are some failures you can point to from above, and some of the moves that were made and weren't made. And so, it kind of reeks a little bit also of not taking personal responsibility for the roster. Like, I know JT Realmuto, that was a big story in New York, with him being a free agent. Was it this last offseason?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he made sense for the Mets, and they end up giving this big deal to Dan, which I don't know. He may be the nicest guy in the world. I don't want to bash him on the show, but I do not understand. That was the worst contract of the offseason for me, and I thought so right away. And he has been, as I expected he would be, not particularly productive. I think he was more of a platoon player against left-handed pitching. Track record was that of a platoon player against lefties, which is the weak side of a platoon, and you give him $40 million. And I get it. I mean, maybe he's a great guy. Maybe he's a great defender. I think the defensive track record is actually kind of up and down, but maybe he made some improvement. I don't know. But they didn't get JT Realmuto. They spent money on Lindor. They gave up players to get Lindor and then gave him the big contract. And then he had been kind of disappointing until he got hurt, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Look in the mirror a little bit, I would say.
absolutely. And I think that the Realmuto situation, James McCann had a brilliant agent. Basically, he kind of stapled his client's value on Realmuto, and it was essentially Mets don't miss out on the only other starting catcher on the market. You're not going to be able to get JT Realmuto. We're going to get a deal done now. They put the pressure on the Mets and they folded to it. And I hated the signing at the time because, in my opinion, Tomas Nido is a better defensive catcher than James McCann is. And if you look at James McCann, 2019, he's an all-star, but then completely collapses in the second half. So it was a good couple of months. Shortened season, good couple of months. So, maybe he's a hot starter, but he hasn't put it together for an entire season, his entire career. So to pay him off that was just kind of mind-boggling to me. And then you didn't even get the hot start this year. He didn't even give you that. So it's just been a bad signing. Luckily for the Mets, they have their best prospect, Francisco Alvarez, is on a fast track to the majors, and he is a catcher that can really change things. So maybe McCann's just going to be a really expensive backup in a year or two. But yeah, that was a huge miss. Lindor, I think, and we're
Lindor,
back.
I think. I got
Lindor
Lindor, I
has been
think.
better than I think the outside observer would know, because he just got off to a terrible start. And then when you get off to that bad of a start, the numbers are kind of dragged down all year. There was a pretty large sample of the season where he was about what he's been throughout his career. Maybe not the same power, but providing incredible defense. And I mean, look, their record, there were 7 games over with Francisco Lindor since he's been out. I don't even know how many games under they've been, but they are now under 500. So I think Lindor was still a good move. The James McCann one, though, is definitely, like you said, the Mets' worst move of the offseason, and probably up there for, outside of maybe Trevor Bauer, the worst move any team made, and that's not
Good.
because of what happened on the field. This episode is brought to you by Spotify Green Room. Spotify Green Room is the first social audio platform made for sports fans. The app is free to download, and once you're in, you can talk with me, other fans, athletes, and insiders in real time about your favorite team or sport. I host my Green Rooms on Tuesdays, where you can finally get in on the conversation you listen to here every day. Go download the free Green Room app now, which is currently available on all devices. Be sure to create your profile, link your Twitter, join the MLB group for the latest league updates, and follow me at Finkelstein Ryan to be notified when my room goes live. I know you won't want to miss it. I'm planning to be live on Tuesdays, which is today. I can't wait to hear everyone's thoughts on the Mets. I'll see you there. Spotify Green Room, changing the way we talk sports.
Let's talk about the trade deadline, huh? Both teams had pretty active trade deadlines. Something that caught my eye when I was watching the trade deadline coverage was obviously when the Mets acquired Javier Baez from the Cubs, the reaction of Francisco Lindor. I assume you saw. He was like walking across the field, and he was ecstatic because these guys are countrymen, right? And they go way back to childhood, if memory serves. And so how cool was, and what are your first reactions of Baez? I know he's had some strikeout issues, which he has in general, and I know he's been hurt, but just came off the IL. But what was your reaction to the trade and Lindor's and all that?
Well, I wanted the guy you guys got. I wanted Chris Bryant. I mean, that was, I've been talking about Chris Bryant to the Mets since the offseason. I was hoping they'd pull off a trade then to get Bryant, even before they got Lindor. I kind of wanted both of them. And so it was a little disappointing for me that they went for Baez because, look, if you're a team that's struggling with your approach, getting a guy who's leading the league in strikeouts and strikeout rate and all that stuff, he doesn't really fix those problems. Now, what I will say, though, is it's still fun to watch Javi Baez play baseball. The guy's one of the most electric players in the game. The few games the Mets have won since the trade deadline have almost all been because of Javi Baez. Now, he's had a platinum sombrero in the middle there. He has struggled at times for sure. But the one thing he brings you is instant offense with his power. He has, great speed. He does some crazy stuff on the field. We've seen 2 slides already that are just, it doesn't even makes sense with the laws of physics, the things that he can do and contorting his body to get away from tags and stuff. So look, he's definitely an exciting player. I think the Mets as a whole didn't improve enough at the deadline if they really wanted to contend this year. I think part of that was because Jacob deGrom is out. So I think they kind of did a half measure by getting one player who you could say is a rental, but because of that relationship with Lindor, I really believe a deal is going to get done this offseason, whether you like that or not. I think that's going to happen. I think that's why the Mets were comfortable parting with the top 5 prospect to get him, because I think he'll be around. And you know what? I've said it on my show. There's worse things to pin your hope to than Francisco Lindor and Javi Baez at the middle. So it's a lot of fun to watch. I'm excited to see them both on the field together. We still haven't seen that yet because Lindor's been out since the All-Star break. He should be back this week, hopefully in this series against the Giants. And you're going to see some highlight plays that are going to probably make Giants fans pretty upset, but Mets fans pretty happy.
Yeah, they like it or hate it, and I can see the reasons for hating the acquisition of Javier Baez, and that's just yet another thing that kind of falls on Cohen, I would say, just to tie back to that. You're talking about approach. You literally acquired the guy with arguably the worst approach in the game in some respects. I get it. He has the electric, game-changing power, the defense, the speed, the base running, the sliding, the tagging. He's a dynamic player, but he also does not have a good. I agree with you 100%. To have 2 players kind of up the middle, and who's even going to play second? I assume Baez, because
Baez will.
The golden child there with the big contract. Baez second base, that's going to be really dynamic defense. So I look forward to seeing those two on the field, but 100% with you that Chris Bryant, I think, is the better player. And you could also that the Giants gave up less in return to get Chris Bryant. The Mets also got a pitcher, but I'm not even remembering his name. That's the type
Trevor
of impact
Williams,
pitcher.
He spent most of the time at Syracuse since he got traded for. He was just a depth add. He will be under contract next year if he doesn't get non-tendered. But yeah, it wasn't much of anything other than let's just get another arm that can give you some innings.
Yeah.
So yeah, that really didn't impact the package much.
And I read just yesterday.
I am curious, actually, that
Go
I
ahead.
was just going to ask, what did the Giants give up to get Chris Bryant? Because that's not something I've been clear on as far as how those prospects were regarded.
Well, they gave up Alexander Canario and Caleb Killian. Canario is in the low levels of the minors. He's kind of a boomer bust type. He has electric kind of tools and power, but also approach problems, a lot of swing and miss, a lot of strikeout, and there's a good chance he never amounts to anything. But if he's able to improve his approach, then he could be a big power hitter, middle of the order type. But those types of prospects exist, and most of the time they don't pan out. And then Caleb Killian was having a really good kind of breakout pitching season in the minors, but still certainly wasn't regarded as under prospect anywhere, top 10 prospect on any list. And Canario, they're both kind of at the 9 to 13 range in the Giants' top prospects lists. People would generally say. I personally haven't scouted either of these players, so I'm kind of basing it off of just what I've read. But the Giants have a good. Some of them rank. I think Baseball America just came out with their, as did MLB.com, with their mid-season or late-season top lists, and the Giants were ranked by, I believe, MLB.com as number 5 as the number 5 system in the game. So good system, and they didn't give up top 10 prospects from that system. So I've read some analysis of all the different moves that got made on deadline day, and the consensus is that the Mets gave up more for Javier Baez. But I also read yesterday that the Mets were trying to get both. Did you read that? That they were trying to get Baez and
Yeah.
Bryant?
The Mets farm system is really top heavy. So because Brody Van Wagenen traded 19 prospects in like 18 months, uh, and I'm maybe exaggerating the length of time he was running the team, but it was 19 prospects that he traded, and traded some for the likes of Keon Broxton and Jake Marisnik. 5 prospects to be exact for those two center fielders on like the last year of their deal, who didn't really amount to anything for the Mets. So it's you can blame the pass regime a little bit for the lack of ammunition the Mets had at the deadline, but really I think that Jed Hoyer was just kind of, he really won the deadline. I think that he saw some prospects that he could get from the Giants for Chris Bryant that he probably couldn't have gotten for Javi Baez anywhere else. I think Javi Baez really only had value to the Mets where you had Lindor in the owner's ear saying, "Get my best friend here." And I think that pressure resulted in what we saw. So the Mets' number one priority was Baez instead of Bryant, instead of saying, "Look, we don't want Javi Baez. We want Chris Bryant. If you want Pete Crow Armstrong, give us Chris Bryant." It was, let me try to get both. And that need for Baez, I think, really came back to haunt the Mets because I think they didn't get the best player for their best trade chip that they were willing to give up. So it's definitely a big miss by the Mets front office, especially when you kind of look at the comparative packages there. And I think that, it just comes down to priorities, and maybe the Mets priorities were in the wrong place.
And to me, from afar, I hate to say it, but it just seems like that's the continual trend with is that they've got some backwards priorities, and the wrong people are calling the shots. Like, but Francisco Lindor should not be calling the shots as much as he may be a great guy and well respected in the game. You've got to have someone in charge who has a plan, and it's, I don't know. You get what I'm saying? Like, I just think that that's
No,
always
I
kind of
do.
been the thing. And it's been the Wilpons in the past, and it's been Brody Van Wagenen. You've just got the wrong people making decisions, and you've got to be a little bit more. I don't love the direction of the Mets, and I still don't, even with leadership.
Yeah, I think, to kind of bring this full circle, the Mets need their Farhan. I mean, they need a guy who has been, and as much as Zach Scott could be that guy in 5 to 10 years, he was their second choice. I mean, they had Jared Porter in there first. Jared Porter deserved to be fired, never should have been hired. They should have done more due diligence on that guy and his track record, and talk to not just men, but talk to women who worked with him and kind of understand what they were getting into with that guy. But the reality is they do not have that executive that fills that role of president of baseball operations that can really just give you that strength that a Farhan has given the Giants. So I think we were due
Loved the
for one
point you were
more, right?
making.
We
Yeah,
were
we were
due
due
for
for
one
one
more.
more.
But what I was saying is that the top priority this offseason for the Mets has to be to find that guy. And there's been some rumblings about Theo Epstein. I don't know if he is planning on staying in the league office or if he wants another GM job or another president job. That would be, clearly a huge upgrade over what the Mets have right now. That is what they had to figure out this offseason. They have to find the executive that can really take this team to another level. And also, I wouldn't mind if they poached Chris Bryant and signed him instead of Baez, but I'm not sure if that'll happen.
He loves it in San Francisco. That's all I'm going to say.
I think he's going to stay.
It's like been a love fest since day one. He's been loved. He loves it here. He's done well. He's had a good series in Oakland coming into this series against the Mets. So it'll be fascinating to watch. We didn't really talk much about the upcoming games, but Giants Mets is always kind of classic. Forward to it. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for joining the show. Kind of running out of time here, but it was a lot of fun. I'm sorry about the connection issues that apparently were my fault, but Ryan, any final closing thoughts, or are we wrapped up here?
Just do us a favor and let the Mets get 2 games here. I mean, clear. I know you're in a tight race with the Dodgers, but the Mets need it a little bit more right now. So I'm hoping that at home the Mets can take 2 or 3, especially after they lost 3 or 4 to the Giants on the road.
I think that you've got a decent shot because of we didn't really talk about it, but the Giants they've got some pitching issues right now, some injuries, and you're also kind of getting the back end. So you're going to get basically the worst that you could get if you're, facing the Giants. You're getting a young guy filling in, and you're getting Johnny Cueto and then Alex Wood, who's been pretty good, but inconsistent. So I think you've got a shot for 2 out of 3.